The Maxi art stitches on the Pfaff creative icon are like works of art underneath your needle. So we're looking at menu 5.4, and as we look in these stitch areas, you're going to notice that they are very wide. They're actually much wider than you realize them to actually stitch. So remember, what you see on your screen is actual size. So I'm going to show you a couple tricks about sewing these out and what to be aware of as you choose them. Hopefully you're taking time to stitch out your stitch book. We have a fabulous link below this video here in the description that will take you over and let you see how to make the ultimate stitch book. But I do remember when I was stitching these stitches out that I realized how big they are. I needed to know how much fabric I needed. I also needed to know where they're going to start. So as you can see here, on this particular stitch, you're always looking for that little green plus. The green plus means that it's going to kind of start a little bit over to this side, and I need to allow for the width here. So what is the width of any particular stitch? Touch your stitch edit here, and whatever this says 40 millimeters. So that means you need to have 40 millimeters worth of space so you don't run into other stitches or other areas you don't want to be stitched. The other most important part is this. This is the stitch length. So 110 millimeters is what one repeat is on this machine. So that is also something else. And literally, if I hold this fabric up, I can't even do one repeat for this particular stitch. I'm going to actually run out of stitching area. So I would need to turn my fabric this way for me to even get one repeat. So 110 millimeters, that's over 4 inches long for that particular stitch. There's one stitch in here, it is pretty amazing. It is actually the long, sorry, is this the one? I think there's one of them in here that was longer than I had ever planned it to be. Now this menu isn't the only menu that have extra wide stitches. Again, as you are working through your stitch book, you will find that some of these stitches do come out much bigger than expected. So again, keep an eye on your stitch width and also your stitch length so you're not surprised when you get to them. And again, you're like, wait, how is that going to be much bigger than I expected it to sew? So a lot of these stitches towards the end of their groupings are much longer than you will ever expect. So just kind of keep in mind there where you are starting and stopping. So I'll show you the little tricks. Let's just go ahead and let's just do stitch number 2. Here's one of the stitches I've used. It was actually not only side to side stitches, but also a stacking stitch, which we used in the Pfaff Stitching Cosmos online course. I love that it really helped fill in an area much quicker. So instead of a lot of little stitches, it actually is a wider stitch. So even in some of the areas where I didn't want to have to put row after row, just use some of the Maxi stitches, and before you know it, one of them is usually enough to fill in. If you're interested in our Pfaff Stitching Cosmos online course, take a look at the links below this YouTube video. So some tips for sewing out stitches that go side to side. Whether you have drawn a line on your fabric or you're using something on the side of your machine on the throat plate for lining up. So for example, if I just kind of keep my eye on this circle here, when I go ahead and start and stop, my fabric needs to travel so it comes back and comes back to that same point. Now, if you don't keep an eye on it, after a while, you're going to start to drift, and that's definitely not something that you want. So usually another little trick is to sew out one repeat at a time. Make sure it kind of comes back to that start and stop line. I'll also be watching the edge of the presser foot, just the fact that it's staying parallel to a line on the fabric or the edge of the fabric. I'm going to use the start stop button just to kind of get started. We do have some stabilizer underneath this fabric as well. So again, as you start to see it go off to this side here, you'll find that it will kind of watch for it to come back into the starting point next to that circle one more time. There you go, and you can see. So I'm going to just let it stitch it out one more repeat here, just so you can see. And again, I'm kind of just keeping an eye on the lines as that fabric travels around. I just touched the scissor button that gave it the indication I wanted to stop at the end of the pattern, lock it, and cut it so I can just pull it straight out. But wouldn't that be fun to do? Even variegated thread would be a great option. And it's just, it doesn't take much, but it's very bold. People always ask me about the stitches that are bigger than their normal stitches on their machines.